Kath. Now it's time for Media Watch. James Creedon is here with us in the studio. Hello there, James. Good to see you.
Laura.
We're going to start with a lot of reaction in the French media, pretty much the top story across the board, to these demonstrations here in Paris yesterday. This is Manif pour tous, they're called, and at the core of this protest is opposition to gay marriage, which François Hollande signed into law late last year.
That's right. Last year it was legislated for in May of last year. Since then, about 7,000 gay marriages performed in France, which I think was about 4% of the overall marriages in the June to December period, which, bearing in mind that there might have been a backlog of couples who wanted to go down that road, it isn't exactly massively taking over the marriage scene, I suppose you could say.
But it's kind of done and dusted, isn't it? I mean, what do these people want to do? Are they trying to have the law repealed?
I think some of these demonstrators yesterday, the estimates were there were between 80,000 and 500,000. The organisers said it was 500,000. The police said it was 80,000 people taking to the streets. Some of them are worried about the legislation being elaborated on and taken further, and for in vitro fertilisation to be opened up to same-sex couples. For now, the gay marriage legislation allowed for marriage and adoption, but not assisted conception, etc.
And so what has been the reaction?
All right, well, Manuel Valls, a lot of reaction to the Interior Minister, who wrote an opinion piece in the Journal du Dimanche Sunday paper, saying he was worried about the emergence of a Tea Party à la Française, that the fact that you have these elements who are still protesting against a law that was passed by the Parliament in May of last year means that it's a sort of a very anti-establishment, anti-government, anti-parliamentarian movement, and that you could compare it in some respects to the Tea Party in the US. Now, you know, there has been a certain amount of disagreement with that, but he's saying that the right-wing parties, such as the UMP, need to distinguish themselves clearly from these movements, because movements such as the Manif pour tous...
Right, because didn't Jean-François Copé, the UMP leader, he got quite close to the Manif pour tous, didn't he?
That's right.
Which didn't do him any favours, it has to be said.
That's right. And several other politicians, such as Henri Guénaud, who was the former speechwriter for Nicolas Sarkozy, he was at the Manif pour tous as well yesterday. Now, it's interesting because far left supporters are saying, you know what, François Hollande, you are asking for this because you have now gone to the right wing in terms of economic policy. So you're forcing the right wing party to go to the far right in order to kind of stay legitimate.
Okay.
Yet on the right wing...
This is Mélenchon's line, isn't
right,
it?
Exactly. Yet on the right wing, you've got Henri Guénaud. If I could pull up that page, I think we have some difficulty getting it. But Henri Guénaud, who is the... former speechwriter who I just mentioned a while ago for Nicolas Sarkozy, he said actually that the government is probably quite happy to see a sort of a Tea Party, a French-style Tea Party emerging, because that could well split the right. It was even a strategy...
As the Front National has already done.
That's right. And it was a strategy going back to the era of François Mitterrand, hoping that the far right would actually gain in strength to split the Conservative vote and therefore be re-elected. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure really the left wing is that pleased.
It's quite an anti-Hollande movement in itself. I mean,
That's
I think
right.
Lots of elements have been drawn into what started out as a protest against gay marriage, and now it's attracted all sorts of protesters, isn't it? So.
Absolutely. And just one more element before we move on. This article by Renée Kaplan on her blog points out that it is really a very complex picture. We saw last weekend a day of anger being held in France. That was a massive protest which included anti-Semitic elements, racist elements, homosexual elements, and then much more moderate elements. Just all of these anti-François Hollande people going from the absolute extremist racists to people who have moderate economic considerations. And against the backlog of all of that, right, you had a rumour whirling around schools in France during the week that there was a new gender studies education programme, which would essentially, the objective was to deny the difference between men and women, to encourage children to become transsexuals, to encourage early onset of sexuality. So you had in particular a lot of Muslim parents keeping their children out of school. The government then had to say, look, this is absolute rubbish. This gender studies programme, which does exist, is mostly about teaching male and female equality. Yeah. And one organiser in the provinces pointed out that there was a 30% increase in the anti-gay marriage protests that we saw yesterday from Muslim families who wanted to basically
a lot of unrest
support
in France. Very quickly, Facebook 10 years old tomorrow. I can't believe it.
That's right. It is 10 years old, and a lot of
How many times have you changed your profile picture, James?
Well, too many times. And indeed, as one person pointed out, time to face up to reality. I'm in love with the projection of my own desired life. That is Hannah Slapper writing for The Guardian, saying it's time really to grow up at some point, that underneath all of the kind of more respectable photos and Facebook statuses that she has now, there are all these lurking images from her college days, and that
It
is
never
quite
leaves you
dangerous.
with a good feeling, doesn't it? When you've spent a bit of time on Facebook, you never walk away from it as you do when you walk away when you've been to the gym, for example, or you've been out for lunch with friends. It's
I
just
think there's
not-
a kind of a slightly addictive quality, and there have been articles pointing to that as well, that it
you
affects
want
your
a new
brain.
message every time, don't
That's
you?
right.
When you like.
That's
when you
it. It has this
share.
sort of, some people have compared it even to
Yeah.
gambling addiction, that you
wonder-
keep going back for another fix.
But you never win.
Nope.
All right, James. Thank you very much indeed.
Laura.
James Creedon there. Now, it's time for our